stream is usually a bit behind. Oh, you know what? I'm going to VPN. So something got a little bit weird, but I think we're live now, or we will be momentarily. Let's see. Wait for someone to know here. All right. The chat room says we're live, and that's good enough for me. Hi, this is Richard Nicol here. I'm doing modular synthesizer chat. This week, I have one of my oldest modular synthesizer friends as a guest. You may not know who he is, but he's been in the American modular synth scene since the absolute beginning. Steve Rightnour, founder of Monorocket cases, the current Livewire Synthesizers guru. He's been a part of the whole West Coast eurorack scene from the absolute birth of it. This guy has a ton of great stories, a ton of great information about the beginning of it, and some great information about it. We were talking before we went live here. He was telling me about the current status of Livewire and all that, and we'll get into all that later. But I'd like to introduce Steve right now. For those of you guys who don't know him, Steve, how are you doing today? Yeah, I told you it's kind of strange. The rule of thirds doesn't work with this because of the split screen, so you got to be right in the middle. I built in recognition of you coming on today, off to my side here, I built a system with all my Livewire modules. I don't have very many modules from other companies, but I do have a nice collection of Livewire, and you can see them happily chirping away in the background. Of course, it's not plugged into anything, and it's all just for show, but I was playing with it the other day, and it's super, super fun. Yeah, you know, anything to take the view away from this, put it back somewhere else is I think it's the way to go. So let's start by saying you are now shepherding, or you are now running Livewire synthesizers. Tell me a little bit about what's going on with that, and maybe how you became to be the Livewire synthesizer guy.
School and everything else like that. And originally I was brought in because I was...
Steve, I'm
What's
sorry.
that?
You were muted. Can you, you're unmuted now. The world can actually hear you. I'm sorry. So once again, from the top, Livewire and your involvement.
Well, I was saying that I was actually involved from the beginning. The idea for Livewire started probably around 2003. Mike had just moved back to Southern California from Portland, and he was telling me about this whole thing with synthesizers that didn't use MIDI, and they used this like control voltage. And at the time, I'm like, wait a minute. So you're going to sell synthesizers to people with no MIDI? How's that going to work? And he's like, no, you don't get it. It's like a whole thing. And then, you know, flash forward, we were about a year later, he did this sound installation at this thing in Long Beach called Soundwalk, and it was using a bunch of test equipment. So we're talking about these big, like, you know, Hewlett-Packard oscillators, you know, the one with the big, like, you know, 10-inch dials.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He was in a band in the 90s, and one of the instruments in the band was a tone generator that he picked up at a yard sale. And Mike was always good at yard sales. You know, he could find gear at yard sales. So he gets his tone generator, and sure enough, man, in the middle of a song, it's instead of playing, you know, like a lead part or whatever, he's back there turning that dial and hitting notes. He actually had tape where the notes, you know, were. And
yeah.
So you put that through like a delay line, man. It sounds just like a theremin, you know. And it was one of those things where, like, you know, Mike was always bringing home like junk. And it's like, what are you gonna do with that, man? Oh, you know, it'd be like, oh yeah, you're gonna use it, and then like the tone generator, when he pulled that, I'm like, okay, you know what, Mike can do whatever he wants, because that's really cool. So anyway, so he did that sound installation, and then he got this idea. He wanted to put this band together where it was going to be nothing but test equipment, and there's going to be like 3 operators, and he drugged me into that. And at the time, he was living in Long Beach, and I was living in Corona, and that would be, with traffic, almost an hour drive. So I would go hang out with him, and we did this. And then a year later was when he started like going, now I'm going to start building eurorack modules. But he'd been talking about it, for a while. And then I think it was around NAMM 2005 he introduced me to Peter Grenader, and the two of them had this idea where they were going to be, they were calling it a consortium. So it was like you're going to have 2 companies buying from the same parts pool and, saving money. It was like, because this was early, so a lot of stuff was being hand built.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like, you and I have it now where we can just, send the stuff off and have somebody do it. Well, back then you could, but it wasn't as less expensive as it is now. And so there was a lot of hand building. It was all through hole parts. And so they did the launch in the summer of 2005. And then flash forward a year later, we're building, what we're all known for at the beginning was the 9 Inch Nails performance system. And right after we built that was the summer where I reserved the Monorocket domain name, because the idea was they were going to bring in another manufacturer and they were going to license their product. And I put in a bid to build that, but that never worked out. And at that point too, that summer, that's when Mike and Peter realized, you know what, we're actually like competing with each other. Like maybe it's not a good idea that we're like, under the same roof. So they basically split off, and so then, I have a marketing and logistics background, I'm an operations guy. So then I end up, doing the operational type stuff. And at the beginning of 2006, Mike was like, hey man, I need to crank out 10 Frankensteiners. Can you start stuffing PCBs for me? So I've been hand building Frankensteiners in my kitchen since, 2006. And as a matter of fact, until this day, I just did the last run of Frankensteiners, and they've always been hand built.
Wow.
With the exception of, I think, 100 units that I ran in 2009, they've always been hand built. And it's just because that circuit is so, because of the self oscillating.
Yeah.
There's like no point in manufacturing them, because we still got to go back through them and tweak them so they all self oscillate, because it's like with all the tolerance in the parts.
So you don't have trimmers on there. You go in and swap out resistors and capacitors to get them to oscillate properly.
Actually, I got it to the point where I was actually piggybacking resistors.
Okay.
Doing the parallel resistance thing. I narrowed down the part of the circuit that was the problem. It all came down. Yeah, the problem is there was a part of the circuit where, and this is like technical shit, but part of the circuit where it's really supposed to be a voltage divider, but it was actually, I think we weren't supposed to be controlling voltage. We were supposed to be controlling the current. And so anyway, so that's why it was inconsistent, and so once I found that spot, now it's just a matter of, it doesn't self oscillate. Well, here, let me just drop this 10K resistor on here, and boom, now it works. And there was even a period where some of them I was releasing where they did it too much. So like if anybody's got a Frankensteiner where like the last 5% of your resonance knob does nothing but squeal out of control, that's why. It's because we're still figuring that part out. But it's still usable. Because that's the thing, the resonance and the frequency cutoff and everything else like that, it all balances out in the end.
These are the definition of hand-built electronics. Now, in the chat room was asking about the 9 Inch Nails performance system. Before we went live, we were talking about that a little behind the scenes. And you were saying that system was at the very beginning of Livewire, and it was made of mostly prototypes. Can you tell us a little bit about the system and maybe how that came about?
I wasn't there for the sales part of it. I knew a lot of it had to do with Peter's initial relationship with Alessandro. And that's Alessandro Cortini's system. He was the one who commissioned. And he had definite ideas, for what he wanted in the system. And then, there's a bunch of meetings, and just so everybody knows, like Vulcan and the Dalek modulator, full credit to Alessandro for the feature set and everything, because it was literally like him telling Mike what he wanted and Mike, Mike giving it to him. And I can't remember how many. I know in the Livewire system that the Freakensteiner was stock, the dual cyclotron was stock, and then everything else was on proto boards. That's the dual Bissell generator, the Dalek, the Vulcan. There's a couple one-off modules in there. There was a clock dividers, things like that. I think all of Peter's stuff was stock. The only thing that was kind of like put together was the sequencer that was in it, and I think that's because he offered in a bunch of different variations. So it was kind of like he put together, I don't know the components, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm disparaging, but it was like one of those things where I think he was clocking it from. He had a board on there from Model 15 that he was using for a clock, and so it was put together. So I don't want to say that was proto boarded, but it wasn't stock. But I don't ever think that the Milton sequencers were ever really stock.
And now just to clarify, Peter Grenader, he was Plan B.
Right.
Okay.
And that was the thing. That system was a combination of Plan B and Livewire modules, and we built I think 90% of the build of that system was done at Peter's place in North Hollywood. And that case was actually hand built it was a Halliburton Zero case, and that was built by a friend of ours, and he also passed. And strangely enough, he passed before Mike did. And and his name was Jim Brennan. His nickname was Flames. And Flames was like, Flames could basically build anything. He could take tin cans and put stuff together and get you something working. So and that entire case, it's not like it is now, like where we had the ends on the rails and all this stuff. Like he fabricated parts to put that together. So like all those rails and everything are mounted with like parts that he made by hand.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And that's when when I first saw that, I go, there should be a way where we could build a skeleton frame of like the rails and stuff like that and just drop it in the Halliburton case and that kind of thing. But so rolling back to like that time period, Monorocket, like I said, I reserved the domain name because I was planning on getting the module business then. And I sat on that domain for a couple years until the idea of the cases started. And the main reason I started the case company was I fully expected Mike to come back, and that's when you were asking about how I, ended up in the spot that I'm in with Livewire. I took over operations of Livewire in July of 2008. And it's like, because I had, in summer 2007, Mike was still designing the AFG. And April, I think, with NAMM, he actually rolled out like the prototype version, the production version of the AFG. Mm-hmm. And he went into production and like they were cranking out units. And then I was living in Ohio at the time. So by the time I'd come into work at 6 a.m, Mike would still be awake, starting to think about like knocking off for the night. We would chat over AOL Instant Messenger. That's how far back this is. And we would chat, and I'd like, where are you at? And he would sometimes I'd get screenshots or video clips and stuff like that. And then it went dark. Like I stopped hearing from him. Then I couldn't get him on the phone. And then that summer, of course, I got the call. It was like, hey man, he's not gonna be able to do anything for a while. And at that point, I think they'd already done the pre-sale. So we had all these people that are waiting for their modules. And at that point, I'm just like, well, hang on, man, I'll be right out. And I took some vacation and called everybody up, and a lot of people helped. Even like Peter Grenader was one of the first people to step up and just say, hey, man, if you need help, just give me a call. A lot of people came in and helped. Dave from Bubble Sound, he actually worked with us. When he first got into like building synthesizers and stuff like that, he was working with us. He built a lot of product, especially I think after I left California. I think him and a couple other people were helping Mike build. And that was before he started Bubble Sound, because he was actually starting to run stuff right as I took over Livewire in 2008. And then at that point, it was just finish the AFG order, and then after that, it was like, okay, hey Mike, do you want me to keep going? Because I can run Daleks and Vulcans too if you want. And because at that point the AFG was actually being manufactured. It was actually assembly line manufactured.
Okay.
And then I was like, hey man, I just throw a bunch of money at this. We'll buy up a bunch of parts and let's run some modules. And at that point, he's like, yeah, whatever, man, go. Let's see what we can do. And I've been doing it ever since. So effectively, he was designing things, and I was just a big replication machine. I just I was just making sure the stuff got run and make sure it got put out. Mm-hmm. And we're still actually right now. I've got a couple of his designs on deck right now that he developed because he was the Chaos computer started right in the summer of 2006. But at that point, the dealers were saying, hey, we don't need that. We need oscillators. We need a VCO.
Yeah.
So he immediately started designing VCO. So then once the AFG was out and he was well enough to start working again, then he started working on the Chaos computer again. And a lot of the busy work, like the PCB design, stuff like that Mike absolutely hated to do. Mm-hmm. Tim Russell from Circuit Abbey did that. Tim Russell did a lot of work on the clock circuit and things like, because it was a really temperamental circuit. It was really sensitive to noise, and Tim did a lot of work to filter the noise out of it, so it became what it was. And so that was the thing about Livewires. Livewires always had a lot of help from outside people.
Well, it sounds like I never had a chance to meet Mike, but it sounds like his influence was pretty strong in sort of being at the center of what was the beginning of this eurorack community that we have now. That it's outgrown all of us at this point, but that really was the spark that started it all out on the West Coast.
Yeah, Mike was a cool guy. I don't think I ever met anybody who really didn't like him or was put off by him. That was usually my problem. So I was the guy that just stayed in the back and kept my mouth shut. But yeah, everybody liked Mike. And him and Dieter Dofer were good friends. And Dieter's he's such a nice guy, but like all those guys, him and Ken Macbeth. Ken Macbeth and Mike would talk about chatting. Like, I'd go over there and Mike would be rolling, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, I'm chatting with Ken. Because Ken's usually knocking off. He's knocking off for the day, just as we're getting started over here, especially on the West Coast mainly because they're 3 hours behind.
Yeah.
I talked to Ken this morning. I was having breakfast. So usually, like on the West Coast, by the time Ken's done, mm-hmm. They're just getting started out there. So yeah, it'd be really interesting, like, because Ken would already be off to the pub or whatever, so.
That's what my assumption would be based on every interaction I've ever had with Ken. That would be the game plan for Ken.
Yeah, so I got introduced to everybody in the business basically through Mike.
Interesting. So tell me a little bit about Monorocket. I know you don't do Monorocket anymore. Tell me maybe a little bit about how that grew and then how it just ended up being set aside.
Well, the main reason is at the time I started Monorocket, there was like one case manufacturer. It was Dofer.
Yeah.
I can't remember if there was other people doing eurorack cases, but I saw a lot of people hacking stuff together, and the whole thing was, and I think I still hear this now, people, they're so expensive, the cases are expensive. It's like, well, yeah, man, it's.
Oh, we hear that all the time.
Yeah.
People don't want to spend the money on cases. They want to spend the money on the things that make the sound. Right. But unfortunately, power supplies are expensive, and real wood is expensive, and hardware is expensive.
Yeah.
And as you know, making sure the box is square is an expensive process. And people don't want to, most people don't want to pay for that.
Yeah, and that's, and the thing is, I come from the whole school of like, well, something's worth whatever you're willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So when I got into it, I didn't necessarily want to go, all right, I'm just going to come out with something that's, I don't use the word cheap, I say less expensive. So I'm not going to do something just because it's less expensive. There has to be features here. Well, at first, because I can only get 90 HP rails, I'm like, wait, I'm giving them extra HP to begin with. Now let's see what we can do about power. And power was an issue for me for the first 2 years. And because the thing was, it's like, okay, we're all designing our own power. I'm like, there's got to be a way to do this off the shelf. When is that going to come around? And of course, and I bought into the whole, like, don't use switching power supplies and all that. Not, and, out of my own ignorance, knowing that, okay, well, now they're switching so fast, you can't really hear the noise anymore and blah, blah, blah. So the whole idea was to come out with something, and I wanted to come out with something that didn't look like a road case. And, and I'm a guitar player, so that's how I leaned towards the Tolex. I'm like, I want something that's going to look cool after it's been beat up a couple of years. And, and to me, that was my Fender Twin. My Fender Twin was, post-CVS Fender Twin. So the woodwork and the Tolex work wasn't done as well as it used to be. And so it looked all beat up, and I thought it looked cool. And I'm like, yeah, Eurorack case will look cool after, if it's Tolex and it's beat up after a couple of years. So that's why I went with the Tolex. Well, then when I started to see all the Tolex options, then I went crazy. And I'm like, yeah, you can have any color you want, because I was building them all one at a time anyways.
Yeah.
So, and then within the first 6 months, by the time I hit the first NAMM, I was like, man, I've got to actually find somebody to make these. Well, fortunately, there was a company that did a lot of work for JBL. They built their speakers, and they were just up the hill from me. I was in California at the time, and they were up in Apple Valley. And they're like, yeah, we can totally do this. Well, they're doing like all of, the full tone echo plexes. They're doing all their enclosures. And then there was another shop inside there, and it was this guy's daughter, and she was doing all the boutique amplifier, enclosures. She was doing all the speaker enclosures and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, so if you ever get to the point where you want to do like short runs, we can throw you over to there. Well, it's like, okay, cool. So when I run around 100, I use these guys, and when I run 1 to 10, I use these guys. And then we got to a point where I was just taking raw wood from them and then doing the Tolexing, because I could knock out a 9U case in 40 minutes. I had it down to a science where I could just bang them out. And that's what I would do all day. That's why I left California, because I'm like, man, what's the point of being here? I can go lock myself in a garage in Pennsylvania and pay a lot less rent, and that's literally what happened. And but yeah, I think the day that I announced, there was like 2 other companies announced that they were getting into the case business too, and it was pretty much my market for the first couple of years. And then once we relocated the factory or relocated operations to Pennsylvania, then I started doing the OEM thing. I was already doing for Make Noise. Then I started building for you. Mm-hmm. Did a little bit of work for Josh Hawley and Maleko. Mm-hmm. And then it just got beat to the point where the problem with the OEM thing was I was taking up a third of my time, but it was only it only represented about 10% of my business. I was like, okay, I'm getting a little upside down here. And it was just, and at that point too, the intent was to keep the modules going at the same time. Yeah. So I was trying to balance things. And the other hope too was when I moved to Pennsylvania, I was actually hoping to tap in some of the locals for labor, but it was really difficult to hire anybody. And I think it was mainly just because it was such a foreign entity for that particular area, because it was rural Pennsylvania. So it was like, okay, you're building these boxes and you're putting this vinyl stuff on them, and it didn't jive. The thing was is like when I was a kid growing up, if I found a company like mine, I'd be like, oh man, I'd be there every day. I'd be bugging them. I'd probably work for free, But that was the thing. It's like it's just it was a cultural difference, and of course then you were 2 hours away, so and then it was a matter of the manufacturing part, getting the woodwork and stuff done wasn't hard. It was the Tolexing was so labor intensive. And then at some point things just, other competition came into the market. The first year or so with competitors, there was, God, I've been trying to remember the name of that company that came out, because literally their lines were exactly like mine, but they just covered theirs with Line-X.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
that was really frustrating. Watching it from my point of view, it was really irritating to watch that.
But it was like one of those things, though. I'm like, I really didn't feel a bump from that. What really slowed me down was that eventually, and you and I were talking about this earlier, my issue then became like for a while we were doing 3U cases, and then I got hip within a couple months, and I'm like, wait a minute, these 3U cases are going to go out on the used market in a month because anybody buying a 3U at this point in the game is fooling themselves. They're going to be wanting another they're going to be wanting a 6U here real quick. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not going to be selling 3U in a year because all these Monorocket cases are going to be out on the used market. Mm-hmm. And I started noticing too that the resale value of the used Monorocket case was sticking. I'm like, yeah. I said, there's no way. So I immediately got out of 3U. I think I did 3U for like maybe 6 months. It was really short. And then...
well, I know you did them for us for quite a while because we were doing the foundation synthesizers in them. And I know at the end you were just doing them for me. You weren't selling them all. And we were selling them empty, but they were essentially Monorocket cases.
Right. And yeah, and then things just, then other case companies started coming in. And the thing was, I didn't intend on Monorocket lasting as long as it did. I expected Monorocket to be done by 2013. In 2013, I was still peaking. I only expected Monorocket to last like 5 years. Because the thing was, I knew that once I showed everybody, because it's kind of like one of those things where it's kind of like, some dope like me can do it. Everybody's going to like look around and go, hey, if some dope like him can do it, then, I can do this too. And that's pretty much what happened. A lot of people got into it. Plus, once you start doing things, being a guitar player, I totally understand. It's like you see somebody do something like, I could do that better. And that's good. And that's one thing that I do dig about Eurorack now is that there's a lot of people that have taken a lot of, they basically looked at something and said, I can do this better. And they have done it better. And the customers, the people who use this stuff are better for it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just the way this kind of thing works. It's just, it's the business cycle. And my problem is that I knew logically that there was a time to walk away, but I enjoyed doing it. Because the thing is, when I started Monorocket, that was the first time I'd ever worked with wood. And, I was never really like a shop class guy in high school or anything like that. And, like my entire family could build a house in a weekend, but I don't have any of those skills because I wasn't raised in one place. I grew up in the military. Yeah. So it's kind of like, the only hobbies I really had was something that you could pack up and move every 2 years. So, so I really once I started doing the wood thing, I really dug it. And just the craftsmanship part of it, there's something to that. And that was the thing. And plus now I'm in rural Pennsylvania. It's quiet, birds chirping, it's like, this is cool, and it was just, that was hard to walk away from. And so it was around probably 2015, 2016, I kept telling myself, you got to shut this down because it just didn't make sense. And then as soon as I go to walk away, bam, I get in an order and be like, okay, well, this will carry me for a couple months, And we were working on the re-releases of the AFG and stuff at that time too. So I'm like, we'll ebb and flow with this. And I kind of figured out a way to keep it going. And then when I moved down here, I'm in Texas now. When I moved down here, there was a makerspace, and they had a CNC. And I took my CNC classes, and I went and started cranking out cases on that. And I'm like, hey, man, you know what? I can keep this going. Not thinking that, really, my biggest problem is that, and I'll tell you this, anybody wants to do this, the first thing you need to do, stop doing the work. Come up with the ideas, do the designs, and get the hell out. We
were talking about that before the stream went live, too.
Yep. Draw lines on the screen and stay the hell out of everything else. Play with your gear, but don't build it. Because seriously, that's what kept taking me down. Because I just want to do stuff, and even in my previous life, the stuff that I did, my biggest problem was I would still get in there and do the work, and not just back off and say, okay, here's a gaggle of people, do the leadership thing and have them do it. I was always in it, and but then I got down here and things really slowed down. Literally, the case business came to a complete halt. There was I got one set of orders, and then I had to get, I essentially stepped aside. I even went and got a job, so I had a day job now because my main focus has been now, I got to get these Livewire modules back up because, 90% of my email is, are you going to release this? When's this going to be available? How close is this ever really going to happen? You know, and that's essentially like what I've, for the last 2 years, that's all I've been about, was like working on all these circuits, getting all these PCB designs done. Because, you know, for a long time, you know, on the flip side too, you know, I've been like tapping on people like, hey, can you design these PCBs for me? And blah, blah, blah. You know, the thing is everybody's already got something going. So
yeah.
I literally stepped up and said, no, you know, there's some stuff that I have to do myself. And that's where I'm at now. So I'm literally at a point where I'm working on something like every 2 weeks there's a new project coming up, you know, and everything's in various stages of being finished. And like right now we're just about done with the flux capacitor. I think I've got a production prototype. Ooh. I'm still doing some testing. Yeah, so we're just about there. And the X mod's right behind it.
Ooh, that's exciting stuff.
Yeah, so and that's been a promise. Go ahead.
So Livewire is alive and well, so to speak.
Well,
I know I was perusing through your webpage, and it said you're going to keep making these as long as people keep wanting to buy them.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And yeah, I'm trying to, the things that I've noticed over the years that have, you know, I've really been lacking, you know, one is the outward communication, because it's kind of like, you know, you don't realize how much people want to know about stuff, but if you don't just put it out there, well, eventually it's going to be like, yeah, it's not something that's going to be in the front of their mind, but they still want it. And of course, I thought about that. I'm like, you know, when is this piece of gear ever going to come out? You know,
yeah,
and that kind of thing. But you never really chase the guy. You know, I've never really chased somebody down. But there's a handful of people, man. I mean, they're on me at least once a month. You know, it's like, hey, man, where are you on this? You know, I'm serious. I mean, they literally, you know, it's like, damn, man. It's like, I got to do this. And a lot of that, to be honest, it's got to have to do with Mike, you know, because, you know, Mike made a lot of friends and a lot of impressions on a lot of people. Like, he made it a point, like, when it came time for NAMM, he was at NAMM. If he could stand, he was there. And he talked to a lot of people. You know, he was never too cool to, like, hang in the back or whatever. I mean, he talked to everybody. So a lot of people are, you know, they have a connection to Mike, and this gear is, you know, probably got a lot to do with their, you know, keeping that connection to Mike. So yeah, I'm definitely going to make sure that it happens. But like the X mod and the flux capacitor have been promised ever since the literature for the AFG was done.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, I mean, there's pictures of there's mock-ups of there's mock-ups of the X mod and the audio compositor on the literature. Yeah, the flux capacitor never had a front pin, but I've literally had the prototype front panels of the X mod, which the new one is not going to look anything like it. So sorry, everybody. Functions are the same, but I had to do some updates.
Making the panels, so you're making the panels larger? Is that what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. So that's the thing. I could never get Mike to go for the, like, because this narrowing the panel thing. That started in, like, probably right after the AFG was released. All of a sudden now it's like we're being told, yeah, we got to make these panels narrower and narrower. And Mike's like, I don't want to do that, man. I can't get my fingers in there, because his whole thing was, it was a tactile thing for him, you know. Mm-hmm. But I kept telling him, like, hey, man, they're asking me to make smaller, or they're asking me to make the cases to where, you know, we can get more modules in one row. Because he even thought it was funny that I was putting 15 PowerPoints on a distro board. He's like, who's going to put that many modules in a row? And I'm like, dude, there are people that are literally releasing nothing but 4U modules. You know, it was incredulous to him. He's like, but you can't play with them. I go, I don't know, man. That's what they want. You know, and
yeah, we put 20 on each row now.
Oof.
And, well, you have to, because people have those 2 HP modules, and they sprinkle them in between everything else, and I'm always surprised how many modules people power with these things. But eurorack it's a thing now. Everything's small, and got to put as much stuff in there as you possibly can.
Yeah, like my last initiative with Monorocket was I was going to basically do nothing but big gear for guys who wanted big rigs. You know, because that last year I did a lot of Lexingtons and I did a lot of Geminis. You know, and those are my large format cases. Those are all 12U. You know, and because I didn't want to go down, I'm like, man, there are people that operate really well in that space. You know, the 2 HP and the 4 HP modules and the small stuff. I don't know. I think it's just because I've always viewed music gear as a performance thing. And there's probably a bunch of people going to be like, well, you're full of shit. I can do this with 2 HP. But the thing is, like, I've just always seen like, man, I just want to, I know guys that want to get in there and reach in and turn knobs, And I think it's one of those things where it's going to be a design philosophy where I'm always going to design the stuff to where you can always tweak the knobs. I can't imagine going much smaller than, 8 HP. Because I can't think of anything that I do that'll fit in, 4 HP right now. I mean, if I do, it'll be something I'll deliberately go, I need a 4 HP module. Let me come up with this. It'll be that. It won't be like, hey, I'm going to come up with a module with all these features. Now let's see if we can squeeze it down into 4 HP.
Yeah, well, I'm the same way. All of our new stuff is bigger, and the reason it's bigger is all the simple little stuff is that market is so saturated.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to compete with someone making, even a simple mixer or an ADSR or a really basic oscillator anymore? Pittsburgh Modular can't do that stuff anymore. Everyone has those. So
Mm-hmm.
our angle in the last couple years, and now what we're really strongly pushing for right now, is we're going big, and what we're doing is we're adding all the features. So if you want a basic thing, sure, they're out there and you can go get that. But in my idea is, well, I want to go the opposite way. I've been designing this stuff for 10 years now. To be excited as a designer, I want new, and I want exciting, and I want innovative stuff. And to do that, the circuits keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We were talking about, before we went live, about what size of SMT components we use. And right. I was saying we use the 603 components. You use components that are a little bit larger than that. And my boards at this point are so dense that I was considering going smaller just to fit more resistors on. But I think the conclusion is, at some point, the UI gets so tight, it becomes almost unusable. So I use the UI to sort of filter out sort of the crazier ideas and the really mm-hmm. crazy stuff. And if it doesn't fit on the panel, then, no reason to put it on there.
Right. That was a design idea or a design philosophy that I got from Mike, because that's what he would do. He would start with the front panel, and which is kind of interesting because I'm looking at this front panel. I've got a prototype. We're coming out with a voltage mechanic, and I'm looking at that panel. I'm like, man, that thing is like, it's 20 HP. And I'm like, man, that thing's too wide for what it does. But then I realized it's like, yeah, but you're gonna fiddle with this thing. Because, once you get all the patch cables and everything installed into it, mm-hmm. It's like, okay, yeah, you're going to need room to get your fingers into the knobs. So actually, it's really not. And I'm going to have to I'm going to let the market make the decisions. But, I mean, it may even, for me, come down to, like, man, if I can't sell a module of a certain size with a certain set of features, and, they're expecting it to be smaller, and I can't do it, I probably just won't do it. Or I'll offer as a kit. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's the decisions we made. We just said, we're not going to make ADSRs. We're not going to make dual VCAs. We're not going to make mixers anymore, just because there's no market for them. Mm-hmm. But there is a market for things like the Voltage Lab and large format oscillators and stuff where we can really stretch our engineering chops and really showcase what we can do. That's where I've seen the interest from us, and I suspect from other companies as well. Certainly established companies, people I think expect a little bit more, mm-hmm. and they're willing to pay a little bit more for these sort of crazier circuits where, a mixer, no one wants to pay $160 for a mixer anymore, because they figure, well, I can get it from Behringer, or I can get one from Dope for $79.
Yeah, and let them have it. And that's the other good thing about, like, you've been seeing a lot of this, back and forth going on about, should certain companies be doing certain things? But it's like, man, if it can be done, let them have it. We'll make the more interesting stuff. I mean, really, I don't want to make an ADSR, and if I do, actually, because there was a mindset before Mike died that we wanted to have all the modules in the categories, mainly so you could have an entire system that was nothing but Livewire. Mm-hmm. I'm to the point now where it's like seeing all this other stuff come out. And like with yours, you have a single panel unit. What's that? Is it the microvolt?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, man, if I'm going to do something with bread and butter modules, then I'll just do it all under a single panel and have them all there, and basically, I'll come up with the Livewire version of a starter. Of course, the oscillators are going to be freaky, but
that'll be your biggest seller.
Yeah, it'll be a couple freaky oscillators, a cool sounding filter, and bread and butter, ADSRs and VCAs, that kind of thing.
No, but our SV1 synthesizer voice and our Voltage Lab, our SV1 by far is our largest selling product of all time. It's still our most discussed, and when I look at our web stats on our website and everything, it's still the web page that gets the most hits. There's something about those all-in-one systems that people really gravitate towards. I think because they know, okay, this will make a sound, and because we can provide a manual that walks them through how to use it, and we can sort of say, here's a curated synthesizer. It's not just a module. There's a huge draw to that stuff, and so that's why when we started working on the Voltage Lab, we said, well, it's got to be the same form factor, and it's got to be kind of the same idea, because we want people to be drawn toward it in the same way and understand that, okay, I don't need anything else to make a sound. So you sort of get over a little bit of that gas and you can just enjoy the instrument that you've purchased. Where if you buy, a 2-row case or something along those lines, you put 4 modules in it. All you want to do is buy more modules. You don't want to actually use the system that you have. So I think these little systems are really good at, well, no, just get down and play with it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to say, are you finding that the SV1 people, are they all new users? Or they're new?
I would say it's about 50-50.
And when I say new users, I mean new to the format. Like, okay, I'm going to get into eurorack and this is going to be my first step. You think it's 50%? We get a lot of
that, yeah.
Yeah, because the thing was back when I started, before I started building the Livewire stuff, to get my chops up, I was building kits, and I built the Ray Wilson stuff, and I built the Sound Lab, and I remember, and that's an all-in-one synth, and I remember building that, and man, I played that thing like I spent $1,000 on it.
Yeah.
Because the thing was, you get the is it the Doper MCV4? It was the least expensive of their MIDI to CV converters.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, I got one of those in Ableton, man. I was making clips and loops and stuff. And that's my synthesizer. That's not none of that software shit. That's mine. I built that. I sat up late nights putting the resistors in this thing, man. And that was the thing, But it was a single unit, Yeah. And I remember, so yeah, I could totally see that. You get something like an SV1, especially if that's all you can afford. Because I still think of that guy too. It's like. It's just yeah, I can afford this right now and eventually build up. That's the other reason why I didn't even get butthurt when the inexpensive case thing, started cutting into my stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah, there's going to be more users out here. Those guys are going to buy modules, and there's a lot better margin on modules.
Quite a large margin. It's funny you built the Music from Outer Space. One of the first things I built when I first started DIYing was a Music from Outer Space weird sound generator.
Right.
I went back and forth with Ray a few times. He was a native Pittsburgher.
I knew that.
A little bit of Pittsburgh, helping the DIY community. I like that.
Yeah, I knew that. Well, because my family's all from Pennsylvania, and so it's just anytime that, and I spent my teenage years in Baltimore. So anytime I run into people from Baltimore or anybody in Pennsylvania, say, oh yeah, where are you from? Kind of feel that connection that. Yeah, I talked to Ray a couple of times. He actually helped me early on with my power supplies. Because what I wanted to do was he has a 12-volt power supply. Yeah. And I wanted to license his. And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. And then he just goes, it's kind of like, hey, dopey, just go look at the application notes of the chips I'm using. You can figure this out, It was like one of those, he kind of gave me the nudge that I needed. So yeah, all those first version power supplies that are out there was because Ray Wilson wouldn't license his to me.
He wanted you to learn.
Well, that was the thing. He was a really nice guy too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it was really helpful. I forgot there was an issue I had with my Sound Lab, and it was literally was like a one-off thing, one email, and it was no problem. But yeah, the reason I didn't go for the weird sound generator was because I, no kidding, wanted to use that sound lab. I'm like, if I'm building this, I want to play this thing. You know, I want to use it. And then and of course Mike saw it, you know, and I don't know if you've ever seen the way that the Ray Wilson version of laying it out is all switches, you know, so you can decide like to switch in the LFO to the oscillator, or you can switch in the ARs to the oscillator and stuff like that. Mike's like, trash that. We're patching it. Just pull all the switches out. We'll put patch points in it. And once we put patch points in it, and he's like, you know, because then we can hook it up to all the eurorack stuff I'm doing. And then no kidding, it's, you know. And then after that, it was kind of like, well, hey, man, I can build modules. I built this, you know, and I patched up my sound lab. So, and it's still like that, you know, like, you know, putting stuff together, it's almost the same as like populating that sound lab.
Oh, there's definitely that's one of the reasons I got into this. There's a deep satisfaction from putting something together with your hands and saying, hey, here's this thing I made, and just using it yourself and creating something that is just you. It's kind of it's an amazing feeling, and that it doesn't go away. You know, the longer I do this, the designs get more complicated and more complex, and they take longer to make. But that feeling of awe that you get the first time you see a finished one, and you get to sit down and spend an evening with just headphones on, sort of immersed in this world that you've spent the last 2 years creating. It's amazing.
Stop. You mean the first time you get it, look at it, you're awe-inspired, you plug it in, it actually works. Because I haven't slept in a week, man. I just got PCBs for the flux capacitor in, and I haven't slept yet because I haven't built one yet. I mean, you know, because I had to get an order out. I'm just like, man, please work. I don't want to wait another month, you know. But yeah, no, and and moreover too, you know, you think about that. You pulled that idea out of your head. You know, that was part of your imagination, and you making it real. You know, that's like. Because, you know, and then I started wondering, it's like, man, I wonder how all this, like, robber barons used to feel, man. You know, think about, like, Carnegie, like, he designed some of those bridges in Pittsburgh, right? Well, remember, like, when he first designed those bridges, like, people wouldn't get on them because they were afraid to use them, you know? And he's like, no, it's going to work. They're totally going to work, you know? And even he didn't know. Remember they had to walk elephants or something across them?
Yeah, that was in St. Louis.
Oh, never mind.
Well, Carnegie, another Pittsburgher. But yeah,
well,
that was he built. Well, he was first using steel,
right?
The build across the Mississippi.
Okay, so it was him. Okay.
Yeah, and he did. He had an elephant go across it to prove that this thing was solid, because people, you know, they'd never seen anything like this before. Wild story.
Those poor elephants, because Edison was like killing elephants to put Tesla out of business.
I feel like animals, they didn't have much of a chance.
Yeah, not back then.
Now they don't have much of a chance today, but for completely different reasons.
Oh, what a buzzkill.
Well, and on that note, I'd like to thank you for showing up. I appreciate that. We've killed this live stream completely. But maybe we switch gears here a little bit. Maybe talk about a little bit. You've sort of alluded to it here and there about what you're working on now with Livewire. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're currently working on, what we can expect, and maybe over the next 6 months or so?
Jeez. Okay. Yeah. Right now, the newest module that I'm going to put out is the flux capacitor, and the X mod is pretty much right behind it. Like, I got the front panel done. PCB's done. I just have to test the circuit. I'm not using hardware switches anymore, which everybody who got a new dual cyclotron recently noticed that, you know, there used to be a 3-way rotary on those, and yeah. I just want to get rid of moving parts. And so the X mod was supposed to have 4 6-position switches on it, and
those are expensive parts too.
No, those are it's supposed to have 8.
Oh, jeez.
8 6-position switches on it. And in addition to, and what's funny too is that the component that I'm using to replace the switch is the same price.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same price. Then at that point, I just go, now that I'm switching digitally, there's some other opportunities here to do some other interesting stuff with switching. So,
are you using the DG202?
408.
Oh, okay.
And so, since we're using, we're gonna have to use a microcontroller and everything else, to run these. There's some other stuff that we can do. So I'm actually adding on features that weren't originally there, because the XMod was essentially just supposed to route modulation sources from. Essentially, you're going to run this between two AFGs, and basically the waveform outputs are going to be a modulation source, and they're going to be routed into the modulation destinations of the other, and vice versa. So effectively, oscillator A is modulated by oscillator B, and then the bottom half of the XMod, it does the same thing back in the other direction. So you get to end up with this feedback loop of modulation.
I like that idea.
That's the basic function. But now that we've got a microcontroller, there's all kinds of stuff we can do related to how the switching gets done. So instead of just pushing a button, we got CV control of the switching. So effectively, the whole idea right now is to take a step voltage and effectively make the switch. You can essentially switch it, in real time. You can sequence the switching itself. I haven't done anything with it yet. This is going to take a lot of demonstration, because there's another module that we were going to, the audio compositor was supposed to be another expansion module for the AFG. And it was one of those things where it sounded really cool in concept, but then when we actually did it, it's like, as soon as the whole idea was to combine the waveforms, and as soon as the square wave came in, it pretty much creamed everything else, and it just sounded like square wave.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I'm going to do with the audio compositor, if it's even going to come out, but the XMod is definitely going to be a player, because I've done stuff with patching here between two AFGs and VCAs and stuff like that, and I've come up with things I think sound interesting. So I think the switching idea is going to be cool too. But that's, like I said, it's right after the flux capacitor. And it's just going to take some. I've actually got to build it up and just run some code on it and see what happens. But flux capacitor, there's actually, you can hear examples of what it does on the Monorocket site. And I'm in production mode right now. I just got to make sure that the PCB design that I did does what the breadboard I designed, or the breadboarding I did does. So
that's usually the goal.
That's typically yeah. So, and this is effectively my first PCB design by myself. It's for the first time I've been cut loose. I've had a lot of help in the past. Like Tim from Circuit Abbey has been a huge help. Tim did the Chaos computer. Tim did the AFG. He did the new dual cyclotron. He did the new AFG. So he did all the PCB work for that. This is like, now I've been essentially cut loose now to do that part of it. Because that was the one thing I never counted on when I took over Livewire, was that I was going to end up doing this part of it too. I always just wanted to be the background operations guy, and because there was, Livewire had a certain kind of image to the public, and Mike was it. Just even in the approach, the way he sold things, and the way he pitched to the public and everything else. And there was, somebody joked once that if I took it over, there'd be bikini models and cars and stuff like that. So, because I'm a sales guy, and so I've managed to keep that away from Livewire. So, but then other than that, after the XMod, I'm also going full bore on kits. So these kind of things, the kits, DIY kits right now are going parallel with the modules, because the kits I don't have to do any manufacturing on. So I could, I just have to make sure the circuit works, like with a production prototype, and then bam, it's out. So, and I've already got 2 kits lined up, and these are 2 modules that were designed while Mike was waiting for revisions on the Chaos computer to get done. So they were designed between 2008 and 2011. And one of them is the voltage mechanic, and it's 4-channel CV processor. It's got an onboard sample and hold. And then the other one is it's a passive mult and attenuator called the voltage distributor. And I see the voltage distributor as a good, like, my first kit, because essentially it's all passive components. You just drop it in some jacks, you drop it in some pots, and you're done. It's essentially, it's like practice soldering on a Livewire module.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are two kits that you'll probably see before summer. So what did I cover? I covered Flux, covered Xmod, kits, and then revisions to the Dalek and the Vulcan have to happen. And that's probably going to take the rest of the year. And then I've got other stuff backburning, that'll eventually get done, or they might get slipped in. It just depends on how quickly the production goes. Once I get stuff back here, if I have breaks where I'm waiting for stuff to be run, then I'll probably start working on something else. But I think the Dalek and the Vulcan are going to take up a bulk of my time for the rest of the year.
Oh, that sounds. You're just making me think of all the things that I have to do as well. And boy, there's so much. It never ends. It never ever ends.
And of course, I start out the year with there's 52 weeks in a year, and then I can do this. My average workflow is this, so divide that by 52 weeks, and or divide 52 weeks by that, and this is how much stuff we're going to get done. Man, and then it's like, then by the end of January, I'm curled up in a fetal position in the corner, just going, man, is my flux capacitor going to work?
Yeah, it's designing this stuff. It's frustrating for me because I spend, a lot of time drawing it up and getting it to where I want it to be. And then I feel like once I have the PCBs finished and we're sort of just going through the revisions of the PCBs, making sure it works the way we want it to, that amount of time is so long from the time that you have sort of finished working on it, so to speak, until it goes to production. And then the production until you have them where you're in the shop and you're starting to ship. It's such a long time that I kind of lose focus and I lose interest in it. So it's like, oh, that thing, that's already, that thing is gone. I've already moved on so many times to the next thing. I'm 2 or 3 things ahead of that. A good example is this cascading delay network that we have coming out soon-ish. It's been in production for a while, and it'll be ready when it's ready. But people are asking me about that. I'm like, wait, I haven't thought about that thing in a month now because I've been working on the oscillator and I've been working on these other little projects that you sort of, I'm sure you're the same way. You can only do so many things at one time, and you can pretend that you can multitask and do 10 things at once. But what that really means is you're doing 10 things really slowly, or you're not focusing and actually accomplishing what you want to accomplish because you're spending so much time switching between ideas and projects that you never actually get anything done. So what I've been trying to do is just like, hey, I'm going to do this one thing, and I'm going to start, finish, and then I'll move on to the next thing.
I literally have to journal to do that. I have a journal just going, don't move, stay on this until it's done. Because I prior to doing the work with Livewire, the work that I did, that's all it was spinning plates. That's what I called it. I mean, it was literally like, we had different customers, different companies and everything was a crisis that had to be solved every day. And I was so used to operating in that environment that I come into this, it's like, well, wait a minute, I can just kick it and just work on this one thing. And it's so foreign, it feels wrong. You almost feel like you're cheating, You almost feel like you're ripping people off, but no, but that's the thing. It's just a different head.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, is there anything I can't read the comments? So does anybody ask any questions or?
Well, we could take some questions. People were asking about the 9-inch nail system a while back. We covered that. People were bummed about elephants. It looks like.
Sorry, everybody.
It seems like a couple of the guys are interested. They like the idea of DIY kits, so that's pretty sweet.
Cool.
Yeah, that seems to be the live chat right now. If anyone has any questions, I think we could probably answer a few questions and then probably shut it down for the evening. This has been super fun. Just getting to talk with you because we don't chat very often. We'll text message back and forth now and then. Right. But since you've moved, it's obviously a lot different. For those of you who don't know, Steve would come to Pittsburgh and perform with me. He was half of sort of the silent film soundtrack team, and we did 2 or 3 of those together. A lot of fun, and we didn't really practice. Oh, we did that many. Jeez.
The only one I missed was Harrisburg.
Oh, okay. I did that one solo. That was a lot of
Yeah.
fun too. So we would do these things, and we never practiced or anything. You would drive from Altoona, and I would drive from my place here in Pittsburgh, and we would meet at the venue and set up our gear and kind of give a rough outline of what our ideas were for the show, and then do the gig, tear down, and sometimes you would come over to my place. We would have a beer and talk about it a little bit, but that was sort of it. When you lived in Altoona, you were selling me cases. We would meet halfway at this barbecue spot that they had really nice brisket. It just happened to work out that it was about an hour from me and it was about an hour from you. So you would load up the back of your pickup truck, and we would swap in the parking lot all the cases into my car, and then go in and get some barbecue. So it's sort of a strange kind of relationship we've had
well,
over
we can
the
be in
years.
Bristol, Tennessee now. I'm sure we could find some barbecue there.
Oh, I'm sure we could. I'm sure we could. Are you going to be, now that you're back full-time doing the Livewire, and I'm certain I know the answer to this, but I'm going to poke at you a little bit and ask anyway. Will you be attending Super Booth or NAMM this coming year?
No NAMM, not Super Booth this year. I've already told Andreas, it's like, if I can keep this company going, I'll be there next year.
Okay.
You know, the only thing that keeps me from going to these shows and everything is really it's a revenue thing, you know. And,
oh, sure.
And I'm not begging for money. I'm just saying it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I've got to sell a bunch of stuff to be able to go and do this. I really want to be at NobCon this year because I've been promising, you know, Suit and Tie Guy. I've been promising since 2013 to come to NobCon. You know, I've been out of the loop on the NobCons. You know, I almost went last year. I actually had a booth. I was actually lined up and ready to go, and then just, you know, the product wasn't ready to go, so I didn't end up going. Actually, no, that wasn't last year. That was the year before.
Okay.
Oh man, I had an accident. I remember. Never mind.
Yes, I remember that.
I was going to say, because you had mentioned earlier, and I was going to snap in a joke. You were saying, yeah, you know, we chat every once in a while. I go, yeah, I send you pictures of my injuries.
Well, did I send you? I know we spoke after I had broken my leg, so I think that's what keeps us going. Is it seems like every 6 months or so, one of us breaks something.
Yeah.
that keeps us going. Oh boy. So
yeah, so that's why I didn't go to NobCon the last time, was because, you know, I had that accident. But but yeah, you know, before that, I mean, prior to the big move to Pennsylvania, yeah, I was going to trade shows all the time, and you know, so yeah, I plan on doing it again. I definitely want to get over to Super Booth. I mean, that thing goes off every year. You know, I talked to Ken McBeth this morning about and he's talking about, you know, the possibility of going. You know, if everybody doesn't get, you know, if they don't get locked out because of this new virus that's floating around.
Yeah, well, I know Ken at Super Booth it's entertaining. He did last year. I don't even think he had a booth. He would show up. He would take the boat in with us in the morning, and he would spend all day just walking around taking pictures. You know, because he's a big camera guy.
Oh yeah.
So and it's not like he's taking pictures of gear. He's walking outside taking pictures of random things, and then come around lunchtime. You know, he's having some beers, and then it's party time. And then he did perform, I think, the last day of Super Booth last year. Fuckity Buckety performed.
Yep. Yeah, he's supposed to perform again this year. They're going to close the thing out. I heard.
Fantastic.
I heard Nitzereb's playing Super Booth this year.
No.
Yes.
Oh, don't say that, because that's funny, because I told Danielle, for those who don't know, my wife, she's a co-owner of Pittsburgh Modular Synthesizers. I was complaining to her. I was like, Andreas needs to have a band that I want to see. Why can't he have Nitzereb come and play Super Booth? A band that, you know, I want. Oh, you're teasing me, but that's okay. I hope that's true.
How much you want to bet that I probably misheard that this morning? And a bunch of people heard him. I don't know everybody's going to be pissed at me. Be pissed at me if I'm wrong, but that's what I heard.
That's what you heard it here. Steve says Nitzereb Super Booth. Well, that's probably some. Seriously,
but if you're, you know, if you've got the means or you're already in Europe, you should be going to that show. You know, just like here in the U.S., everybody should be going to NobCon. You know, because that was a grassroots show. I was at the first two. You know, that was a grassroots show that really turned into something. You know, and it's not one of those things where, where our category is competing against, band instruments and drum clinics. It's just like it's our gear. It's our people. So you should definitely go to those shows.
That's the nice thing about Superbooth is it's funny because Gaz and I talked about this at the end of the show last week. Everyone that goes to Superbooth is so passionate about it because it feels like sort of a coming together of the tribe at a festival more than it feels like some sort of business trade show. Now it is that, and we do, when I go there, I do some business during the day, but really to me, the show is all about the evenings and getting to hang out and all the stuff that you do, spending evening with Gaz or spending an evening, going to the various clubs and the various places we go and just the conversations that you have sort of off hours. It's tough. I find it tough for that event to get back to the hotel by 6 or 7 in the morning because you're just out, you're talking and you're talking and you're talking and it just never seems to end. Everyone is so interested in the same sort of thing. It really does have this amazing vibe, something that you really don't get at a NAMM or a show like that, which is just so laser focused on business that they lose track of sort of why we're doing this. Where I think Andreas has really captured that.
That's the thing about Andreas. I mean, it's no secret. Andreas was one of our first dealers. Andreas makes commerce cool. Seriously, because you were talking about how like, yeah, sure, we're doing business and everything, but it's this. It's like it's all the same thing. And that's to me, just my whole worldview's like that. It's just like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with commerce. It can be cool, and that's it's like shows like this that make it cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's why I'm more into stuff like this. And this is one of the reasons I stopped going to NAMM. I was out of NAMM when I was still in California. I would set Mike up a booth, and I'd set up his station because Mike always wanted to go. Yeah. I didn't see the point of being there mainly because the whole point, because of my background, it's like the whole point of being at the show is to get a dealer, and you're set up in the booth of a dealer. So it's like, how are you going to, So,
were you guys were set up in the Noise Bug booth?
No, we were at the time. We were still carried at Analog Haven, so we were set up. We were either set up in their booth. I think the last 2 years that we were at NAMM, Maleko actually split a booth with Analog, or they basically put the booths together so then we could like cross each other's borders, so to speak.
Okay.
And so that's we would have our systems in those. 2010 and 2011 were the only shows that we did where I was involved. Prior to that, Mike did NAMM on his own. And then the thing was because I was the one tracking the sales, and focused on all of that, I was seeing that it's like, yeah, we're not getting any bump out of a presence at NAMM. This was right around the time too, like when people were starting to realize, yeah, we can do a lot more by building our presence on social media or on the web, or basically directly interacting with the customers all year round versus waiting for this one weekend. And at that point, my whole philosophy is let's just get in a couple stores. Well, let's get in a lot of stores and get the gear there. So then the local people in these scenes were selling gear that these people can actually walk into a store and play with the stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the prerequisite too. So we've never had a store that was web only. We've always had people that you can go in, you can touch the gear, and I never really produced enough to go in any big box stores. So it's always been, your control voltages, places like Noise Bug, places like Big City Music, who's our dealer now. But it's like, the reason I mentioned Noise Bug, because like Noise Bug was literally like right around the corner from where my wife used to live. And because it's in a specific, well, you've been there, haven't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's in the arts section of Pomona. So, and that was a place that we used to go to hang out anyways because there's a concert venue there, and so that's that was where the original Analog Haven store was. That was the first time I'd seen a System 700 in person because they used to have it like you walk by and it's like right there in the store window. This like huge full System 700. And at one point I was like ready to write a check to buy it. Mike talked me out of it.
That's an impressive store window.
Oh yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, I think that's we'll call that a wrap. It was super fun having you on. It was a lot of fun talking to you. Maybe you'll come on and talk to us again. And once we have some more news or some more stories to tell. And
yeah, sure. If I have something to demo, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for showing up. I'm going to shut off the stream now. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We have a ton of people in the chat room today, and that was super great. I will be back next week with Michael Johnson. I'm Michael. Well, I'm not going to say that. He didn't say yes yet. But hopefully, Michael Johnson, our engineer, will come on with me next week, and he will be in the room with me, and we can talk about, I don't know, whatever me and Michael talk about. We will just do it with microphones jammed in front of our faces. But until then, I will be building again probably Thursday night, and then certainly I'll be building or doing a patch on Sunday. So thanks for everybody for watching. Thank you, Steve, for being a guest on the show, and talk to you later, guys. Bye.